At 2:13 in the morning, Marcus Bennett stood alone inside the headquarters of the company he owned. But nobody looking at him would have guessed he was a billionaire. He wore a faded janitor's uniform. A mop rested in one hand, while the other held an old photograph of the man who had built the empire Marcus now controlled. His father, James Bennett. For years, Marcus had been surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Employees wanted promotions. Business partners wanted contracts. Strangers wanted access to his money. Even people who claimed to love him sometimes seemed to love the lifestyle his fortune could provide. So Marcus made a decision most people would have considered insane. He would disappear without actually leaving. For 30 days, he would become invisible inside his own company. No expensive suits, no security detail, no executive office, no billionaire identity. He would work as an ordinary janitor and discover how people treated someone they believed had nothing. Marcus thought the experiment would reveal the true character of his employees. He had no idea it would uncover a secret that had been buried for 20 years. A secret involving his mother, Evelyn Bennett. Evelyn had been the one person Marcus believed loved him before she knew what he would inherit. She had taught him that character was revealed by how people treated those who could do nothing for them. But Evelyn had also carried a fear Marcus never understood. Certain names made her uncomfortable. Certain conversations ended abruptly. Whenever Marcus asked about his father, she became quiet. Then, almost 20 years earlier, Evelyn disappeared from his life. Marcus eventually convinced himself that whatever had happened belonged to the past. He inherited the company. He became one of America's wealthiest young executives. He expanded Bennett Global Holdings, and he built a life that looked perfect from the outside. But the questions never completely disappeared. Why had Evelyn been so afraid? Why had his father died with his reputation damaged? Why had certain company records disappeared? And why had Evelyn left behind so few answers? Marcus believed those questions were finally behind him. Then he met Olivia Carter, and she looked directly at him, not at his janitor's uniform, not at the mop, at his face. She suddenly stopped. Her expression changed. Then she whispered 6 words that made Marcus's entire world stop. "You look exactly like Evelyn Bennett." Marcus couldn't move. Evelyn Bennett was his mother. She had been gone for nearly 20 years, and Olivia Carter was supposed to be a complete stranger. Marcus slowly asked, "How do you know my mother's name?" Olivia stared at him. "Because I knew her." And just like that, Marcus's experiment changed. He had gone undercover to discover who respected him without his fortune. Instead, he had uncovered a connection to the mother whose disappearance had haunted him for 2 decades. But Olivia had more to tell him. Evelyn had once gone to Olivia's father, Thomas Carter, for help. She had been afraid of someone inside Marcus's own company. And before Evelyn disappeared, she had left evidence behind. Evidence someone had spent 20 years making sure Marcus would never find. The billionaire had entered his own company believing he was the one hiding. He was about to discover that someone had been hiding the truth from him all along. 30 days before Marcus put on the janitor's uniform, he had already made his decision. He told no one, not the board, not his advisors, not his closest executives, not even the people responsible for protecting his public image. He would enter Bennett Global Holdings under the name Marcus Carter, a temporary janitorial employee. He would use the employee entrance, eat in the cafeteria, work in the same hallways, use the same break room. And most importantly, nobody would know that the quiet man carrying cleaning supplies was the person whose signature could change their careers with one decision. Marcus wanted to know what happened when powerful people believed nobody important was watching. On his first morning, he entered through a side entrance at 6:47 a.m. Nobody noticed him. One employee nearly walked into his cleaning cart and barely apologized. Another stepped around him, as if he were part of the furniture. Marcus had spent most of his life being noticed the moment he entered a room. Now he was invisible. His first assignment was simple: clean the executive hallway, empty conference room bins, restock the break room, polish the glass doors. The first real test came before noon. Robert Hayes, a senior executive, walked out of a meeting carrying coffee. Someone bumped him. The coffee spilled across the polished floor. Robert looked at Marcus. "Clean this up." He handed Marcus the empty cup and walked away. Marcus stood there for several seconds. He could have revealed his identity. He could have reminded Robert who owned the building. Instead, he picked up the cleaning supplies. As he wiped the floor, he remembered Evelyn's words from childhood. "Watch how people treat those who can't give them anything." At the time, Marcus hadn't understood. Now he did. Some employees were kind. Others ignored him. Some apologized when they made a mess. Others treated him as though he were invisible. Then one afternoon, Marcus saw an elderly employee named Helen Parker carrying several boxes of archived documents. Helen had worked for Bennett Global Holdings for more than 30 years. One box slipped, papers scattered everywhere. Helen tried to bend down, but her knees weakened. Marcus immediately dropped his cleaning cloth and helped her. He gathered the papers and carried the boxes to the elevator. Helen looked at him. "You didn't have to do that." Marcus smiled. "Someone needed help." Helen smiled back. "You know, most people don't stop when nobody important is watching." The word stayed with him. Then another voice spoke. "She's right." Marcus turned. Olivia Carter was standing nearby. She had watched everything. "You didn't even think about it," Olivia said. Marcus shrugged. "What else was I supposed to do?" Olivia smiled. "Most people would have walked past." Marcus didn't know how to respond. For the first time, his experiment made him uncomfortable for a different reason. Olivia wasn't impressed by him. She wasn't trying to gain anything from him. She didn't even know who he was. And yet she treated him with genuine kindness. Over the following days, Marcus noticed Olivia more often. She worked long hours. She arrived early. She stayed late. She treated executives and cleaners with the same basic respect. One evening, Marcus saw her at a hospital. She was talking quietly on the phone. "I'll make the payment tomorrow," she said. "Please don't stop his treatment." Marcus realized Olivia was helping pay for her father's medical care. Yet she never asked anyone for money. She simply worked harder. One afternoon, Marcus found Olivia sitting alone in the break room. She looked exhausted. She hadn't eaten. She noticed Marcus and motioned for him to sit. Then she divided her lunch in half and pushed part of it toward him. Marcus stared at the food. "Why would you give this to me?" Olivia looked confused. "Because you're hungry. You don't even know me." She smiled. "You don't have to know someone to be kind." Marcus lowered his eyes. The words reminded him of Evelyn. His mother had taught him the same lesson. Kindness wasn't supposed to be a transaction. You didn't help someone because they could repay you. You helped because they needed help. Marcus began to wonder whether his experiment had been asking the wrong question. He had wanted to discover whether people could care about him without knowing he was wealthy. But perhaps he was supposed to discover whether he could trust someone without controlling the circumstances around them. Then, late one evening, Marcus saw Olivia standing alone in the parking area. She pulled out her phone. Her expression changed. She opened an old photograph. Marcus couldn't see the entire image, but he saw Evelyn, his mother, and beside her stood a man Marcus had never seen before. Olivia whispered one word. "Evelyn." Marcus froze. Olivia quickly put the phone away. Marcus knew now that she had not simply recognized his face. She had been carrying a piece of his mother's past with her all along. Olivia's father was named Thomas Carter. Marcus knew the name. He had seen it buried inside an old company document. Thomas had worked with Bennett Global Holdings more than 20 years earlier. The records were incomplete. Several pages were missing, but the date matched the same period when Evelyn disappeared from public life. Marcus searched deeper. Thomas had worked with a charity Evelyn supported. He had been connected to the Bennett Community Foundation, and shortly before Evelyn disappeared, Thomas had requested a private meeting with her. Then Marcus found something even more disturbing. Evelyn's name appeared beside Thomas's in an old document, and beside both names was another. Richard Hade. Richard had been one of the most trusted executives connected to the Bennett family. He had remained with the company for decades. Marcus had always regarded him as an older family friend, but Evelyn had never trusted him. The memory returned. Marcus had been a child. Richard's car had just left their driveway. Young Marcus had asked his mother why she disliked him. Evelyn had looked at him and said, "You don't need to worry about Richard. Just remember that people aren't always who they appear to be." 20 years later, those words sounded completely different. Richard had access to the company, access to the family, and possibly access to whatever secret Evelyn had taken to her grave. Marcus began searching the company archives. Many records from 20 years earlier were incomplete. Some folders had disappeared. Some documents contained missing pages. It looked as though someone had deliberately erased part of the company's history. Then Marcus discovered a box hidden behind damaged folders. Inside was a leather-bound notebook. Evelyn's handwriting. His hands began to shake. Most pages contained ordinary family memories, but several entries concerned the Bennett Community Foundation. There were references to missing money, unexplained transactions, private meetings, and Richard Hale. Then Marcus found one sentence that changed everything. "If anything happens to me, Thomas knows the truth." Marcus stared at the page. Evelyn hadn't simply been hiding something. She had been afraid something might happen to her, and she trusted Thomas Carter with the truth. Then Marcus found another note. This isn't what happened. Beside it was a single name, Richard, and beneath it, protect Marcus. 3 fragments, but together they told a story. Evelyn knew something about Richard. Thomas knew it too, and Marcus had been the person Evelyn wanted protected. Marcus searched deeper into the history of the Bennett Community Foundation. 20 years earlier, millions of dollars intended for medical assistance, housing, and struggling families had disappeared. The public scandal destroyed James Bennett's reputation. Newspapers accused him of stealing from a charity he had created. His business partners abandoned him. His reputation collapsed. Eventually, James died with his name still damaged. Marcus had grown up believing his father had made terrible financial decisions. But the records told a different story. The money had moved through several accounts. Then Marcus found companies connected to Richard Hale. Millions had passed through those companies. Marcus kept digging. He found an old financial ledger. Several pages had been removed. One signature had been deliberately scratched out. Marcus held the page beneath the light. He could still recognize the writing. James Bennett, his father's name. Marcus's heart sank. For a moment, he wondered whether James really had been involved. Then he noticed another signature. Richard Hale. Both names appeared on the same transaction. But Richard's name had not been reported publicly. Someone had tried to erase it. Marcus suddenly realized the scandal might have been constructed to make James look guilty. His father may have been framed. Marcus needed answers. Evelyn's diary had said Thomas knew the truth. So Marcus went to the hospital. Thomas recognized him almost immediately. Marcus asked if he knew Evelyn Bennett. Thomas's face changed. He looked frightened. Then Marcus showed him the photograph. Thomas's hands began to tremble. Where did you get that? The company archives. Thomas looked toward the door. You shouldn't have found that photograph. Why? Because some things were hidden for a reason. Marcus told him about Evelyn's diary. Thomas closed his eyes. Finally, he said something Marcus would never forget. Evelyn wasn't trying to hide the truth from you. She was trying to keep you alive long enough to discover it yourself. Marcus froze. Thomas knew who he really was. He knew Marcus was Evelyn's son. Before Marcus could ask more, Thomas told him to leave. But Marcus refused. What happened to my mother? Thomas looked at him. You don't understand what you're asking. Then he whispered Marcus's real name. Marcus. He had known from the beginning. But why? And who else knew? The next morning, Thomas disappeared. His house was empty. His phone sat on the table. His glasses were broken on the floor. His medication was untouched. Someone had taken him. Olivia arrived and immediately realized something was wrong. They searched for security footage. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the neighborhood camera went black. Marcus watched the recording twice. Someone had deliberately interrupted it. Olivia found a note her father had left behind. If they come looking for me, don't trust anyone from Bennett Global Holdings. Marcus knew what that meant. Thomas wasn't afraid of the past. He was afraid of someone who still had access to the company. Richard Hale. That night, Marcus accessed the executive archives under his real identity. He searched through decades of company records. Then he found something shocking. A confidential report revealed that James had spent his final months trying to reopen the foundation investigation. He had believed he was being framed. Richard had opposed the investigation. 2 weeks later, James stopped attending meetings. Months later, he died. Marcus sat in silence. His father hadn't simply accepted his ruined reputation. He had fought to clear his name. Then Marcus found an old message from Evelyn to Thomas. I don't think James is the person they want everyone to believe he is. Evelyn had known. She knew James was being blamed. She knew the financial story wasn't true, and she had tried to protect him. But why had she disappeared? Marcus searched one final restricted file. A handwritten note appeared. Evelyn Bennett knows where the original evidence is. The original evidence. Not copies. Not summaries. The real documents. Evelyn had taken them somewhere. Then Marcus's computer suddenly went black. A message appeared. Stop looking for your mother. Marcus froze. Someone knew what he was doing. Someone was watching him. But Marcus refused to stop. Olivia remembered something her father had once told her. Thomas owned an old warehouse outside the city. Marcus and Olivia found the address. They went there after dark. The warehouse appeared abandoned. But Marcus immediately noticed fresh footprints. Someone had been there recently. Inside, they searched through old crates and equipment. Then Olivia noticed a small box beneath a workbench. It looked carefully preserved. On the lid was a name. Evelyn Bennett. Marcus opened it. Inside was Evelyn's diary. An old photograph. Several financial documents. A small brass key. and an envelope. The envelope was addressed to Marcus Bennett. His hands began to shake. He opened it. The first sentence brought tears to his eyes. "My son, if you're reading this, then the truth has finally found you." Evelyn explained why she had disappeared. She had discovered evidence that people inside the company were manipulating financial records. She knew James was being blamed for something he hadn't done. She knew Richard was dangerous. And she knew Marcus was too young to understand the danger. Evelyn had taken Marcus away because she believed keeping him distant from Bennett Global Holdings was the only way to protect him. Then Marcus reached the sentence he had spent his entire life needing to hear. "Your father was never the man they said he was." Marcus stopped reading. His father had been innocent. The man the world remembered as a disgraced billionaire had been framed. But before Marcus could continue, they heard footsteps outside. Someone entered the warehouse. Richard Hade. Richard looked at Marcus, then at Olivia, then at Evelyn's diary. "You should have left the past alone," he said. Marcus stepped forward. "You knew my father." Richard remained calm. "I knew what he became." Olivia interrupted. "No, you knew what you made everyone believe he became." Richard's expression hardened. For 20 years, he had controlled the story. But now the evidence was in front of him. Marcus demanded to know where the foundation's money had gone. Richard claimed the transactions were legitimate. Marcus asked why the records had been altered. Richard said the company had been protecting itself. Marcus asked why Evelyn had written that James was innocent. Richard remained silent. That silence said everything. Eventually, the truth emerged. Richard had been moving money through companies connected to the foundation. He created records that made it appear James had authorized the transactions. James discovered what was happening. Evelyn discovered it too. She began collecting evidence. Thomas helped her preserve copies. Richard found out. He threatened them. Evelyn understood that if Richard realized how much evidence she possessed, Marcus could become a target. So she disappeared. She took Marcus away from Chicago. She protected him. James stayed behind and continued trying to clear his name. According to Evelyn's letter, his final concern was not the company. It was Marcus. He wanted his son protected, even if his own reputation could never be restored. Marcus finally understood the truth. His father hadn't abandoned him. His mother hadn't abandoned him. They had both been protecting him in different ways. Richard had destroyed James's reputation because he wanted power. He assumed Evelyn's evidence was gone. He assumed Thomas would remain silent. And he assumed Marcus would never look into the past. He was wrong. But there was still one secret left. Olivia looked at Marcus. She remembered everything. The expensive watch. His knowledge of corporate records. The way he moved through restricted areas. The strange confidence of a man who supposedly worked as a temporary janitor. Then she asked, "Who are you?" Marcus knew there was no reason to lie anymore. He removed his employee badge. "My name is Marcus Bennett." Olivia froze. "I own Bennett Global Holdings." She stared at him. The janitor she had trusted was the billionaire CEO. The man she had shared her food with was the owner of the company. The man she had trusted with her father's secret had been hiding the biggest secret of all. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "How long?" Marcus explained the experiment. 30 days. He wanted to know whether people respected him without his money. He wanted to discover who was genuine. But then he met her, and the experiment became personal. Olivia looked at him. "You spent all this time wondering whether I could love you without your money." Marcus remained silent. "But you never trusted me enough to let me choose." Those words hurt more than anything Richard had said. Marcus realized she was right. He had demanded honesty from people while hiding the most important truth about himself. He could have defended himself. Instead, he simply said, "I thought I was testing everyone else. I didn't realize I was the one who was afraid." Olivia told him she understood his fear, but understanding didn't erase what he had done. Trust would have to be rebuilt. Marcus accepted that. He didn't ask her to forgive him. He didn't promise to fix everything with money. He simply promised that he would never pretend to be someone else again. Richard disappeared from the warehouse before Marcus and Olivia could stop him. But he had made one mistake. He had revealed enough. The evidence from Evelyn's hidden box was handed to investigators. The original financial records exposed the trail. The missing foundation money had passed through companies connected to Richard. The records showed how James had been made to appear responsible. Richard's influence collapsed. After 20 years, the truth finally became public. James Bennett's name was restored. The man once remembered as a disgraced billionaire was finally recognized as the victim of a carefully constructed financial deception. For Marcus, clearing his father's name was more than correcting an old business record. It was giving his family the truth Evelyn had spent 20 years protecting. His father had not abandoned him. His mother had not betrayed him. And Thomas Carter had not been the traitor Marcus once suspected. He had been one of the people who helped Evelyn protect the truth. But one question remained. Where is Thomas? The investigation eventually located him safely. He had been taken by people connected to Richard, but he had survived. When Marcus finally saw him again, Thomas looked at him with tears in his eyes. "You found it," he said. Marcus nodded. "My mother made sure I would." Thomas smiled. "She always believed you would." Months later, Marcus made a decision about his wealth. He could have used the recovered fortune simply to expand his empire. Instead, he created the Evelyn Bennett Foundation. Its mission was simple: help families facing financial hardship, support people struggling with medical expenses, provide emergency housing assistance, give ordinary families the kind of help Evelyn had always believed people deserved. Marcus had spent weeks living as a janitor. He had walked through the same hallways as employees worrying about rent, medical bills, and family problems. He had seen how different life looked from the other side of wealth. He understood something he hadn't understood before. Money could solve certain problems, but money couldn't tell you who to trust. It couldn't manufacture character. It couldn't replace family. And it couldn't make someone worthy of love. Olivia eventually returned. Not because Marcus was a billionaire. Not because his name was on the headquarters. She returned because she had watched what Marcus did after discovering the truth. He didn't try to buy her forgiveness. He gave her space. He accepted responsibility. And he stopped hiding. When they finally spoke again, Marcus made no promises about luxury. He simply told her he wanted to build a relationship based on honesty. Olivia reminded him that trust would take time. Marcus said he understood. This time, there would be no tests. One evening, Marcus returned to the office where everything had begun. He walked through the marble hallway where he had once pushed a cleaning cart. He stopped outside his father's office. James Bennett's photograph hung on the wall. For years, Marcus had looked at that photograph with questions. Now he looked at it with understanding. His father had been human. His mother had been frightened. Thomas had carried a painful secret. Richard had chosen power over integrity. And Marcus had spent years believing his wealth was both his greatest protection and his greatest burden. Now he understood something different. Money was something he possessed. It wasn't who he was. He returned to Evelyn's final letter. He had read it many times, but one section still carried the greatest weight. Evelyn had written that the Bennett name might open doors, but it could never tell Marcus what kind of man to become. She told him that James's greatest legacy wasn't the company. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the buildings carrying his name. It was the people he had helped when nobody was watching. Then Marcus reached the final sentence. Never let your wealth become the measure of your worth. Marcus lowered the letter. Finally, everything made sense. He had started the journey as a billionaire hiding behind a janitor's uniform because he wanted to know whether anyone could see beyond his money. He ended it understanding that the first person who needed to see beyond the money was himself. He didn't need to become poor to become humble. He didn't need to pretend to be someone else to discover who was genuine. He simply needed to stop allowing fear to control how he treated the people who mattered. And perhaps that was the greatest secret Evelyn Bennett had left behind. The truth hadn't destroyed Marcus Bennett. It had finally introduced him to the man his mother had spent 20 years trying to protect. A man who could inherit a fortune without becoming a prisoner of it. A man who could carry his father's name without carrying his father's shame. A man who could love Olivia Carter without testing her. And a man who finally understood that sometimes the greatest discovery isn't hidden inside a fortune, a company, or a family secret. Sometimes it's hidden inside the simple decision to become better when nobody is watching. If this story stayed with you, tell us in the comments. If you were Olivia Carter, would you have forgiven Marcus after discovering that he had hidden his identity? Or would you have walked away because he had deceived you from the beginning? And if you believe a person's character matters more than their wealth, share your thoughts below. Here at The Untold Story, we tell stories about secrets, choices, family, love, betrayal, and the moments that change people's lives forever. Thank you for staying with Marcus Bennett from the moment he entered his own company wearing a janitor's uniform to the moment he finally discovered why Evelyn Bennett had spent 20 years protecting him. Because in the end, Marcus wasn't searching for proof that people could love him without his money. He was searching for proof that he could finally trust someone enough to show them who he really was. And when he finally stopped hiding, he discovered something his fortune could never have bought him. The truth about his family, the legacy of his mother, the restored name of his father, the courage to trust. and the possibility of a life built on honesty rather than fear.